I'm Jono Buchanan, and in this video we're going to be looking at articulation mapping. Now this is a video that's going to be particularly important for anyone who's working with orchestral sample libraries, but it has other uses too, so bear with me, even if you're not in that category at the moment. So what I've got here is a MIDI region, which is currently being played back on Spitfire Audio Symphonic Strings library. It's just a single track within this project, just so we can see clearly what we're going to be doing here. And at the moment, what I've got is this phrase, which starts with these really nice long notes. It then goes into some shorter ones, and then there are a couple of very short notes right at the end. And at the moment, all of those notes are being played back on the same articulation, which means the same playing style. And whilst that's working nicely for the long notes, it's working less well for the short ones. Let's just hear it. So what you can see within the contact instrument, which is hosting the Symphonic Strings library, is that in addition to the keys down here at the bottom, which are actually operating the actual notes that we're hearing back, these blue notes here, you can see that there are a series of what we call key switches down here at the very bottom. Now, these are able to access the different playing styles that exist within this library. So what I mean by that is that here you can see at the moment we're listening to the long notes, but if I was to click on these different articulations here, then we'll find, for instance, that the short notes which come later in the phrase would be better played by the spiccato patch. So the question is, how do I switch from one playing style, one articulation, to the other as I go through? Now, the way that this used to be done was that you would simply just play or trigger the key switch notes in between the actual notes that you wanted to hear, so that those key switches would be changed in real time. But Logic makes it easier for us to do that than simply having to program extra MIDI notes right down at the bottom of the keyboard. So let's just see how these work. What I need to do though is just to take note of which keys are mapped to the articulations that I want to use. You can see that there are lots of articulations here. I only need 3 of them. I want the long notes, which are here on C-2. I want the spiccato notes, which are on D-2, and I want the pizzicato, which are on E-2. And the reason why that's going to be important should become clear very soon. So I'm going to go back to my long notes, which are currently playing every note within the phrase, and I'm going to close down the contact window. What I'm going to do instead is to come across in Logic here to this area here where it says Articulation Set. And what I'm going to do is to create a new one. And what this does is to build or launch the Articulation Mapper. This is going to allow me to create a series of pieces of code which are linked to those key notes that I just mentioned a moment ago, which we're then going to be able to apply to our phrase without having to draw those key switches in as MIDI notes. Here's how it works. What I'm going to do first of all within this Articulations tab is to name the articulations that I want to use. So this first one is going to be called longs. I'm going to put this on MIDI channel 1, and otherwise I can just leave it exactly as it is. This articulation ID is going to be created automatically. Now I need 3 of these. The second one is going to be called, well, I'm going to call it shorts. I could call it spiccato. I'm just going to call it shorts. That's also going to be on MIDI channel 1. And if I'm intending later to turn this phrase into something that I might want to use within Logic's score editor, I can actually even add a symbol here. And you'll see that there is one here for spiccato, or spiccato, which I'm going to use here, the staccato option here. And what that will do is to indicate on the score, any notes that I select to play back on staccato will be indicated that way on the score. So there's a nice little tie up there between Logic's different editors. And I'm going to create one more here, and this is going to be pizzicato. This is going to be for plucked notes, which I'm going to put right on the end of my phrase. So here's my pizzicato option here. Again, I'm making sure that these are all mapped to the same MIDI channel. And again, I suspect that there will be an option here for pizzicato as well. Sure enough, there it is. So I've added those symbols, which I'm only ever going to need if I choose to use the score editor. Now what I need to do is to come to the output tab here. And what this is going to allow me to do is to choose exactly how these different articulations are mapped. So the first thing I'm going to do is to choose the type of MIDI data, which is going to control moving from one articulation to another. Now, in the Spitfire Audio Symphonic Strings, those are triggered by individual keys, key switching. Other libraries might use the modulation wheel, for instance, in order to move from one mapper to another. So what I need to do here is to choose the type of MIDI data that I want, which is going to be a note on message. And that's actually going to be true for all three of these different articulations. Again, I'm going to just reinforce that I want to use MIDI channel number 1 here on each of these as well. And now within the selector window, I have a chance to say, right, specifically which note on message do I need to send in order to trigger a long note? Well, it was C-2, which is right down here at the top of the list, or the bottom of the list, if you like, if you think about the keyboard running from left to right. Okay, so that's the longs sorted straight away. And what I can then do is to select the shorts. Well, they were on D-2, and the pizzicato was on E-2. And so what that should now do is give me the option to move between these different articulations simply by, well, we'll see exactly how we now put these into practice. So what I can do is I can open up the editor for this region, and you'll see that a new pane has appeared on the left-hand side, which is called Articulation. And it's as simple as this. I'm going to just turn off the MIDI outlight so we don't hear these notes as I select them. But what I'm going to do is to lasso these long notes, and in the Articulation Mapper, I'm going to tell Logic that those are long notes. I'm then going to select the next group of notes, and I'm going to tell Logic that those are shorts, and the last two are going to be pizzicato. And now what's going to happen is that without us actually having to program those key switches manually, Logic is effectively going to impose C-2 or D-2 or E-2 on the relevant notes as I selected them within that articulation window. So what we can hear now is we've got our long notes at the beginning, short notes for the more staccato notes in the middle of the phrase, and pizzicato there at the end. And if this is a library I'm going to use regularly, and I want to be able to access those three individual key switches regularly, I can actually save this articulation set. So I can save this as, and I could call it Spitfire Audio Symphonic Strings, and I can press save. And now, anytime I want to use this library, I can come across to the articulation set, tell Logic that that's the instrument I've loaded on this individual track, and I'll have access to those key switches. And of course, I could make the list longer if I wanted to have all of the options within that library available to me. I've just picked out the 3 that I want to use here. So in this video, what we've done is we've learned about articulation mapping. This allows us to create a set of MIDI commands which can be applied to the notes within a region to tell Logic to switch between different playing styles within libraries that use key switching in that way.